Hey, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So in the last video, we were setting index options here to make sure that when somebody tries to browse the folder, they cannot do that. They get this forbidden thing there. Now let's put some more advanced options here. So I'm just going to paste some code that I copied from my previous project because I can easily miss something here, and if you miss something in your htaccess file, it just breaks everything. So if you get an error or error 500 is a server error, then you know that you typed something wrong in your htaccess file. Also, to confirm that, you can just remove the htaccess file and see if things run again when you remove it, etc., etc. So let's look at what's going on here. So first of all, this options indexes, you understand what this means, of course, so that we don't see indexes here or we can't browse the folder. Then we switch on the rewrite engine to on. That is actually for this section over here, where we have rewrite rules and rewrite. Oh, in fact, it's for all of this. So the first thing is we're telling it that if somebody tries to access Thunder in here and they type Thunder, this is going to be the name of our command line editor or command line tool. So it wouldn't be good if somebody can access that online, even though it's doubtful that it can work at all, but who knows. So better to limit that. So in fact, while we are still there, I'm going to right click on this main folder, say new file, and just save this one as Thunder. So don't put a file extension, it's just Thunder like that. That should be enough. This will be a PHP file, of course, but one that we will run in our command line. So I'm gonna remove that. So that's just to limit that. So these here are just flags. So like, actually we don't even need this, but who knows. So this one just means process this thing last. Don't go any further down here. This means just a query string added, to add a query string there, but these are more important down here. So this one, for example, says if a user is trying to access a valid folder, allow them to do so. And this one, if they are a valid file, sorry, allow them to do so. And this one is for valid folder. So let's say the user is accessing, or the browser is accessing a CSS file or a JavaScript file, it should be let through. And this one down here is the one that creates that clean URL that we're going to have, the clean URLs. So when we create clean URLs, they're not going to look like the usual stuff. So let me see here. So for example, normally you would get something like index.php when you load your main file, right? So that's index.php, but it isn't there because we renamed it to index2, if you remember in a previous video. So it says not found. But normally if you want to, we create individual pages for our website. So for example, the products page would be accessible using products.php like that. And then here, this is where we put our query string. We put a question mark and say ID is equal to, maybe there's a specific product with ID is equal to 1. And that's how we get information into the page. But instead, what we want to do is we want to be able to just say /products and then remove this .php and then even the ID over there and just say /products/1 like this, and this should be a valid URL. But if I try to do this now, it will say not found here because it's looking for an actual folder inside the plugin.php folder. It's looking for a products folder and then /folder1. This does not exist. So what we're trying to tell our server is that if a file is a valid directory, then access it, of course. Now that which we've tried to access now is not valid, is not a valid directory. So what should it do? It's not even a valid file either. So it should go to this rule instead. And this rule says grab everything It doesn't matter what you are accessing. Any text, this just means all characters of any length, okay, 0 or more length from the beginning to the end. That's what this means here. So grab all, no matter what the user types, this is just what this says. No matter what the user types, just send all requests. Just imagine we are trying to access, change that to actually mean index.php. So rewrite everything. That's what it says here. So no matter what the user types, just rewrite it into this format instead. So rewrite it and say it's index.php and then query string, which we are adding here, and then whatever the query string is should be appended to that. So that's what this one means. Just rewrite everything into this format instead. So essentially what this will do is it's going to access the index.php page. But since we don't really have the index.php page, I'm just going to put a 2 there because we do have the index2.php page. Just to show you that instead of saying not found, it's going to access the index2.php page. So I'm going to refresh now, and you see it says everything is working. So it doesn't really matter at this point what I type in there, it will still just say everything is working because it will access the index2 file here. So of course we don't want it to say index2, we want it to just be index.php. So I'm going to rename it to just index.php like so, and that will match there. And then look here, we're going to have a URL string there inside a key named URL. So you can change this text to anything you want. Instead of URL, you can rename it to whatever you want instead. So to confirm that that's happening is we're going to go to our app. So right here where it say everything is working, I just want to do a print R. So on top of this, I want to echo some pre-tags so that we can see the array properly. And I'm going to say print R and just print whatever is in the get variable at the moment. So the get variable shows us the query string. So I'm going to refresh, and here you see that's the query string that's over there. So if I say, for example, products /new/1 like that, this is what I get in the URL space there. Now keep in mind that if I don't put anything here, I actually won't get that URL key in there. Okay, and that's fine, we can go around that. So just keep in mind that sometimes this will not exist, and sometimes if there's a query string, it will. And then once we grab this, this is the thing that we want to split in that function that splits this stuff, right? So we'll split this into individual pieces, and we can do a check here to say print R, I want it to print to return. Let's say we have the URL function. So we did create a function in functions called URL, and if we don't provide a key, it's going to just return everything in the app URL currently. So if I now refresh, so it tells me undefined variable app, and that's because app is a global variable. So of course we're going to say global like that, so that we grab it from the global scope. And I'm going to refresh, and there we go, we have it. So it says home because that's what we told it to do as a default value here, because we are splitting that. But instead we can grab a URL string which will be supplied when running this function. So here we're just going to say if I don't want this to be empty, so I'm just going to do this. Let's do that. Okay, so URL there should be received, and we go back to our index page to provide it right here. I'm just going to grab in the get. I know that what I want is called URL, but it may not exist at times. So I'm going to put these 2 question marks to say if it does not exist, let's assume it just says home. Okay, that way we always have a value there whether this exists or not. And then once we run this, it's going to run that and bring in, oh, this one, sorry, and bring in that key which we're going to split and then send it back. So let's come back here and I'm going to refresh. And there we go. We have an array of items. And this shows me that item number 0 is always the page name, because even if I don't put any page name there, it's going to say home, which is true. This is the home page. But if I go back to products and such, you see that this is supposed to be the products page. And if I put a slash at the end by mistake, I get a last item here that's empty, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do first of all is just say URL. Actually, let's just say trim here. Let's just trim it while we're supplying it. And the trim allows you to specify what characters you want to trim from the beginning and the end of the string. So if we can do that and refresh, that is gone, even though, so having a slash at the end or not having it doesn't change a thing. Okay, so that's good. At least we have that. Now, if you want, you can do more advanced features like removing spaces if you need that, or removing special characters if you need that, but we're not going to do that. We just want the information as raw as possible. So this is what the URL function will be giving us. On 0, it's the page name. On number 1, you can define that as you wish, number 2, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's great. That is working good. All right, I think that does it for here. I'll leave this so that at least we have something to see while things are running. And there we go. So that's our htaccess file. This is all we're ever going to need to type in this one. So I'm going to close that one for now. All right. Now, the next one we need is to define inside the plugins folder. Now, this one is going to be a little bit more complex because we need special exceptions in the plugins.php folder. So not everything should be accessible in there, especially PHP files. So I'm going to right click, create a new file, and just another htaccess file. So .htaccess over here, and save. Now in the htaccess files, this is where we'll have all the sensitive plugins, the plugins that people can easily check what the code is and make a copy or download those files, and we don't want that. So we have to deny access from all, right? But with exceptions. So how do we do that? So what I'm going to do is copy and paste some code here, and there it is. Now, please pause the video on these things and actually type this text. I'm going to try and enlarge it a little bit. Like so. This is the maximum it can go, I guess, so that you can see it more clearly. There's a space here and the space there, so this is the extent of spaces. No spaces here, so you have to type these things as they are. There's a space there and this space there. No spaces in here. Okay, so let me explain what's happening. So we're denying access to all files except the index.php file. We want that to be accessible. We want the CSS files to be accessible and image files to be accessible. So that's what we are doing here. So first of all, we are saying deny from all. So this is deny everything, but in here we allow these guys over here. So this caret here, this caret, I think that's what it's called, is just saying from the beginning, check from the beginning. Yeah, if something starts with index.php, it doesn't matter what's at the end there, just allow it. So everything in here will be allowed. Anything index.php will be allowed. Yeah, so that's from the beginning there. That's great. So if we have index.php, allow it, or index.css, allow it, or index.js, allow that. Okay, for those that use React and stuff like this. And then we also allow PNG files. We allow JPEGs, JPG, JPEG, WOV. So you can easily just add one more here. These are, of course, fonts. Some of these are font files. So I built this up from scratch because every time I had a problem, I would come here and add an extra file extension, just like that, until I got it to this level. So I figured this is most of it. So SVG, GIF, and WebP. So you can add your own, of course, to the list of allowed files. So what this means is that PHP files will not be accessible, but everything else will. So let's test this theory here. I'm going to put a new file in plugins and call this one, let's see, plugin.php, and then new file, style.css, and then let's go on a new file, and then file.txt, just so we get some options, right? So let's see what's happening right now. If I go here and say /plugins, of course it is forbidden because it's just a folder. It doesn't match anything that we want. So let me just for a second delete what's in here, save that, and then try to refresh. Okay, so we still have that deny from all, but let's try and load file.txt, and it actually loaded. As you can see here, it's an empty file, that's why you don't see anything. But if this is a text file, if I had that and refresh, you will see this is a text file, so it is accessible right now. And also if I go plugin.php, that would be accessible as well. So let me try this. Let's say plugin.php. That's accessible. You can tell because there's an empty file there. It's the same with CSS files. I can say this is a CSS file, like so. So let's go style.css. Let's check that out. So style.css. And this is a CSS file. So now let's go back and change this. Let's do this. Let's save that. And let me come back and try to access. And you see the CSS file remains accessible, which is exactly what we want. But let's go back to plugin.php. That one is now forbidden, right? But the CSS file is still accessible, but the PHP file is forbidden. Let's go back to the text file, refresh, that's forbidden as well because it's not part of the list, etc., etc. So as you can see, that's some security we have over there, like so. Okay, so we'll leave that htaccess file there. Great. And also let's delete the other files that we added in here that we don't need, except for the htaccess file. So file, delete, plugin, delete, style.css, delete. Okay, that is awesomeness. Very good. Okay, now the other thing we have to do is at this point, after doing all of this, between starting the app and these params here, we should load our plugins. So let me just do this. Let's see, load plugins. So remember, the plugins should be loaded before the application even starts. So we load them there. So there will be a something containing plugins, and this will be equal to load plugins function, like that. Okay, so plugins will be loaded in there using that function. So we have to create a function that matches this one in the functions.php page. In fact, what we're going to do is let me change this. Let me duplicate this. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say get plugin folders first of all, and then we load our plugins in here. So let me do this. Okay. Load plugins. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so what we're going to do is I want to put an if statement here and echo if there are no plugins that were loaded. In fact, we're just going to die like so. No plugins were found. Please put at least one plugin in the plugins folder. So of course you can put whatever message you want here. This just will show when there are 0 plugins in there. So just like on the top there's just one line in here, so we don't need the curly braces at all. We can leave it as this. So this one will contain plugin folders. So get plugin folders, and then we'll load the plugins that we managed to get folders from here. Okay, so these functions will evolve over time, but I think it's better to do it this way. You will see as we go why that is. So first of all, let's do a function get plugin folders, and then we're just going to return an empty array to show if there's nothing. We just make sure that that is returned because we want this to be an array. Now PHP 8 stuff means I'm a bit reluctant in using PHP 8 stuff, but you can do this to make sure that it always returns an array, and if it doesn't, it shows an error. But this is all PHP 8 stuff. So if you know you're not going to be using PHP 8, you don't need to add that over there. So for now, we're just going to remove it, but you can add that there, which makes things much more readable. And then we'll need another function called load functions, of course, or load plugins, sorry. So this one will return false if no plugin was loaded. So this one is say load, and let's go load plugins like that. So return false, and yeah, that should do. And then this one will have the plugins folder. Or we can just use plugin folders, something like that. Okay, so that's what we're expecting, an array actually. So if you're using PHP 8, you can say array like that, because you're expecting an array. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go back to the index page here. Let's see. So currently, of course, we're going to get this message. So let me come back here and let me refresh. So we see that message, no plugins were found. Let's make it a bit more appealing. I'm going to put this in the center and then put an h1 tag. So let's do the opposite here. Let's close that h1 tag and close that center tag. All right, let's refresh. Yeah, I usually don't like this font, so just at the cost of being too pedantic, let's just say font family here, Tahoma, because I know everyone has that on their system, so it's gonna work. Okay, so no plugins were found. Please put at least one plugin in the plugins folder. Okay, so that's the message you get when there are no plugins. Now we need a way to grab the plugin folders. So in here we are assuming that plugins will be inside folders and not just straight up files. So what we're going to do is go to our functions here, and at this point I'm just going to say folders is equal to, we're going to use the scandir function, and let's give it the folder we want to scan, and this one is the plugins folder, like that. Okay, so once it does that, now I'm going to do an echo of pre-tags because I just want to see the result of this, and then I'm going to do a print r of the folders, like so. Alright, and probably let's just put die over here. Not that it will matter anyway, because that's at the end. Okay, so there we go. So we got a file called htaccess, and 2 dots and 1 dot there. So this 1 dot represents the current folder. These 2 dots represent the folder above. So if you want to go to the previous folder, this is what you would select, and this one is just the file. So it scans everything in there and shows me what I've got, but I have no folders in there. So let me just make sure there are some. So here we're going to make a new folder. The first plugin we're going to create will be called basic auth for basic authentication, and another one will be header and footer. So let's do a new folder, header dash footer. Now you can name these plugins anything you want, but use a dash for separating the words that you want. Now you don't have to do that, you can simply use capitalization, but I find that sometimes it's easy to forget capitalization, so I do it this way instead. So new folder again, and this one will be the, what am I missing? The authentication, the header and footer, and then one will have the home page. Now of course you don't have to put separate plugins for each one of these items. For example, the header and footer can contain the home page as well, and in fact the basic authentication can contain the header and footer and the home page as one plugin. But the reason why I do it this way, where I make every small component a separate plugin, is because it makes it more portable. Because it's very rare that you're going to find 2 projects that have the same exact footer and header, but you will find 2 projects that have basic authentication, right? Every project actually requires authentication, so you bet that you will reuse this plugin a lot more than you're going to use the header and footer or the home page part here, because you're going to have to change more if they're all combined together, which defeats the purpose of portability. So the smaller each component is, the easier it is to use it in multiple projects, etc. So it's up to you how you do that, but I'll leave that there. Let's go back to scandir and see what we have. So at least it's showing us stuff here. So this is good, but I just want folders, not files, because as you can see it shows us files as well. I just want all the folders in there. So what I'm going to do here is I can loop through these folders thingy. So I'm going to say for each folders as folder, like that. So we're just assuming each one of those is a folder, and then here we'll check if is dir. That's how you check if something is actually a folder. Okay, so I'm going to create a variable called res, and then just add stuff to it, and I'm going to add that folder to it there. So here we're going to create result, which is res, as an empty array, and then every time we find a folder we just add it to that array. And then here, instead of folders, I'm just going to show me what res contains at the end of it. So if I refresh, oops, there it is. So what's going on? Okay, so the others are not folders except those 2 dot and dot dot. But the reality here is that it's not considered a folder because remember that we are inside the plugin.php folder at this point. So it's checking that particular folder to see if there's a folder named basic auth, etc., which are not there actually, because plugins are inside the plugins folder. So let's do this instead. I'm going to say plugins folder is equal to, and I'm going to move this guy over there like so. That way I can easily change it in one place. This is what you do whenever you start adding hard-coded values that are the same all the time. You just make a variable for that so that you have only one place to change it. So there's a plugins folder there, that's great. But when we are trying to check if a directory exists, we should add the plugins folder as well to the beginning of it so that it reads plugins / and then the name of the folder. That way it will check inside the plugins folder if that directory exists and not in this folder it's in. So let's go back and let's refresh, and now you see these guys are back, which is good. Those are actual folders, that's great. But we don't want these two. We don't want this one and this one. These are not valid in our situation. So we're going to say something like if folder is not equal to a single dot, like this, a single dot, or it's not equal to that double dot either. So I'm going to put that there. Let's put a double dot, and we'll put an and like that. So if folder is not this and is not that, and it is a directory, then add it there. So let's come back here and refresh. Now we have exactly what we want. These are our folders. That's great. So now we return that, or we return this. Now, if none of this happens, res is already an empty array, so it's better to just put res over here, like that. Good. So we return that, and it should work out fine. Okay, that's good. But we can assume that we have plugins now of sort. So plugins folders. So what I'm going to do is loop through here. So for each plugin folders as folder. Alright, so return false. But once we add something, at least one, then we can return true in that sense. So I'm just going to put something like found is equal to false. So then here I can just return found, because found will be true or false depending on what happens. So if we found at least one, once we are looping and there's at least one folder, then found changes to true, because now at this point we did find at least one folder. So that's good. And in this case, it's not going to say no plugins were found, because we do have some plugins now. But just to test this, I'm going to open this folder, and I will cut all these folders out of here and into the wild here. I just want to see if it's going to recognize that there are no folders. There are no plugins anymore. So if I refresh, and now it shows me no plugins were found, which is awesome, because then it's working as intended. So here all I need to do is put back these boys into the plugins folder. Boom. Okay, so now that they are back there, we should not get that error anymore. And there we go. Okay, so things are working as intended for now. We are able to load plugin folders. We can split things here. So you can put your what's this, your comments here, splits the query string in the URL. So you can put your comments on these things so that they're easier to remember what you are doing. Okay, so far so good. We have the basics down, right? Now here I like to make things neat, so I'm going to move this a step forward and then move these guys a bit like that, so it kind of looks better. So I'm using the tab key there because it doesn't matter what spaces you add, those are going to be gotten rid of during compile time, so this is okay. All right, I think so far so good. Let's see here, and there we go. All right, goody. So in the next video we continue. Let's see the structure of plugins and how they are going to work. All right, so I'll see you in the next video.